Hello and welcome. Welcome to Quilt Conversations Live. I'm Geraldine Wilkins, the Living Water Quilter. I'm so glad to be with you. Hello, ladies. I see Lori is here, our moderator at YouTube. And who else? Marcia, welcome, welcome. Jacqueline, so glad that you're here. Rochelle. Ladies, we have a full night ahead, so I want to get started quickly. You're probably wondering, where did she get this idea that we want to teach and publish? Well, guess what? You are already doing it. You are, I am, we are all teachers. And in some way, we teach someone. You've heard that expression, each one teach one. Whether we're teaching our children, our nephews and nieces, our neighbors, our friends, or members in our quilting group, we all teach in some capacity. Think about it. Let us know in the chat if you help your friends with quilting projects. Do you teach them how to put on a binding, how to cut fabric, how to use a ruler? Let us know what you do to help others learn the skill of quilting. Now, you may not want to teach on a big scale, but sometimes when we are in a group, especially a quilting group, we might have something like my guild years ago had something called round robins. That meant that on a particular evening, they would have volunteers with a table that would teach one trick or tip or technique, so guild members would have an opportunity to learn from someone who knew how to do paper piecing, how to cut fabric for binding, how to use a particular ruler. So we would have stations because everyone in the guild had something to offer, and I think you do as well. So I wanted to share with you some tips to help you go from teaching informally or teaching on a bigger level. Remember, we've been talking about thinking big this year, not limiting what we can do. And that's going to depend on each of us, how far we want to go. But I want to encourage you to go big, really big. Remember, we talked about Joseph. Do ladies remember? Let me see in the chat. Remember, we talked about Joseph and the plans that God had for him, how he was a shepherd, and then he had this plan. He gave him a dream, right? That he was going to be a ruler. So Rochelle says, I teach one of the basics on how to quilt classes. See, I knew it. I knew you ladies do the teaching. And Lori says she agrees. Everyone has something to offer. Yes, absolutely. Well, if you ladies know, you know I think a lot. So I was really thinking a lot about Joseph and his journey from one shepherd, small young boy to a ruler, and all the stuff in between, all the steps that he had to accomplish. And I wondered, how did he do that? And often we can look at Joseph at the hardship he had, but somehow he survived that hardship. How did he do it? So I came across this scripture that I want to share with you. And it says that Joseph is a fruitful bough, even a fruitful bough by a well, whose branches run over the wall. Now, that might sound a little cryptic, but if you dig a little deep, one, it was words that his father said to him. The last words his father Jacob said. And what Jacob was saying to Joseph and to his brothers was that Joseph was the type to cling close to and be near to his source of inspiration, his source of strength, his source of wisdom, and that is God. So I realized that in my journey of teaching, God has been my source. my strength when I didn't know what I was doing. I would pray, God help me. I don't know how to teach this subject. How do I begin teaching? Well, I began just like you did. I began by teaching ladies at my quilting group. And from there, I started to teach at quilt shops and then at my church. It slowly began to grow, but each step I was learning a different skill, just like Joseph. I was learning how to organize. Who was I teaching? What was their skill level? So that's one thing you want to know. What's the skill level of the person that you're teaching? Are they beginner? Are they intermediate? The next thing was, how do I plan out what I'm going to teach? What is the specific thing that I want them to achieve? Do I want them to be able to stitch a straight seam by the end of the class because they're beginners just learning how to stitch? Do I want to show them how to accurately cut fabric? We have to have an objective and a goal when we plan to teach. And ladies, if you think about it, I know many of you do this, we do it automatically, but we haven't really maybe thought about it step by step. Once we figure out who we want to teach this skill level, what we want them to accomplish, we want to think about what curriculum we're going to use to accomplish that specific goal, right? Maybe some of the people you're teaching need to see a demonstration. Maybe some need to be able to see instructions, written instructions. Those are some of the things you want to consider, how you're going to take the information and pass it on to the next person, right? So, what do you think happens when we teach? We get better, right? We end up learning not just the new skills of organizing, getting supply lists, creating a curriculum. We learn how to help people. We learn patience. There are so many things that happen when we teach. So it is worth it on every level to teach, at least in my opinion. Let me see who's here. Rosemary arrived. Welcome, welcome. Thank you that you're here. Let's see who else is here. All right, I didn't miss anything else. Okay, so what happens when you start to teach is that you start to develop this skill of learning how to put together information in an understandable way. And after a while, your students say, well, I want to see a pattern. Do you have a pattern? Do you have a book? So then it naturally leads to publishing. Okay. Now, my particular journey, I want to know, are you kind of interested in how I went from teaching to publishing? I want to share with you how that really began. The publishing part might sound difficult and challenging. Do we have to go to a big publisher? Really, every single time we create something and we share it, we are publishing. It doesn't have to be in a formal way. There are many different levels of publishing. Sometimes publishing means that you submit your quilt to a quilt show, and that show creates a book. You are now published. Even if your group, many groups will print a anniversary book, you are a published quilter if your quilt is in that anniversary book. There's so many ways in which we can publish. Maybe you work with a company that asks for your input or photos that you have of your quilts to put in one of their publications. And that happened with me years ago as a photographer. And I want to show that to you here with my overhead camera. These were the early days of me being published as a result of working. I talked about this a couple of weeks ago, and I mentioned that it was 10 years ago. This is what happens when you turn 60. Decades become years. It wasn't 10 years ago. It was 30 years ago. 1994 was the earthquake, and I was published in this book created by the Los Angeles Times. I have a photo in here that I took during the earthquake. Here's the photo. My name is listed in the back as one of the contributors under photography. Then, as a result of working for the Los Angeles Times, I was published in National Geographic. I photographed a terrible scene, unfortunately. Some homes slid down a hill in a very wealthy area in Southern California. And so I took this photo, my first and only photograph in National Geographic. But hey, I'm published, and you can do the same thing. Sometimes what happens is that there are requests. Different organizations like this one, MOPS, Mothers of Preschoolers, sent out a call. We want to create a book about mothers, a mother's touch. A friend told me about it. I submitted photos that I just took of my girlfriend. They accepted it. You can do the same thing. And here she is. I went to visit her. I took this photo of her and her son. I submitted it, and now I'm a published photographer in a book about mothers. There's so many ways that we can publish. Another example, a friend told me about this. It was another call asking for quilters to submit quilts based on different topics. I submitted several, and they printed 2 of them in the book. I didn't do the publishing. I just submitted what I already have. That is one of my quilts. And then here's another one. So if you take pictures and you submit them when they say, we're making a book about this topic, you can become a published quilter, a published photographer. Now, there are other ways in which we can publish, and we have a special guest tonight that's going to join us to talk about how you can publish your own book, the ins and outs, some of the things that we might be afraid of, and she's going to demystify some of that for us. We've had her here before, but before I introduce her, I want to share with you another way in which you, as a quilter, can be published. If you want to share the patterns that you make, we all are inspired, right? You see a quilt, it inspires you to make another quilt. You change it in a way that it becomes yours, a totally new design. Hey, Terry, so glad that you're here. Welcome. So glad that you're here. Terry says, teaching is a gift. And that is true. I love it when the light bulb comes on. Yes, there it goes. Dina, do you have a book available? I do not have my own book. I have been in several books as a contributor. So I shared with you a few of those, and I've been in some others that I've been a contributor quilter. And yet I know I need to make and write a book. I get asked that question frequently. And I shared with my sister one of the books a couple of years ago that I was a contributor, and she kind of waved it away. I don't want to see that. I want to see your book. When are you going to write your book? So she's trying to encourage me to move forward. Welcome, Cassie. You're never late. You're never late. So, what about publishing your own book? I think publishing a book comes out of a natural desire to share your gifts and talents with others. You have something of value that you want to contribute to the world. You want to help someone. You want to share a story that's going to encourage someone. You want to preserve a legacy. And this is why I want to share with you our guest, Tangular Irby. Do you remember her? She came here last year and talked about her Gee's Bend legacy and her book, Pearl, and her Gee's Bend quilt. She's here with us tonight. We're going to have a nice chat about teaching, about writing a book, about inspiration. Let's welcome Tangela to Quilt Conversations Live. Let's see if I can get you on. Sign guest one. There you go. All right. Hello, Tangela.
Hello, hello. How are you?
I'm doing great. It's so wonderful to have you here with us again.
I'm so happy to be back. Thank you for having me. Thank you so much. I learned a lot about you tonight. I didn't know all those things that you were sharing.
Oh, yes.
Mhm.
I have this new idea this year that I'm going to share a little bit more of my story to help others and encourage them that whatever goal they have, they can pursue it, even if it seems like it's too big.
Absolutely.
Mm.
Absolutely.
Ladies, Tangela, all excited that you're here. Lori says, welcome. And Rochelle says, welcome back. Let's see if I can fix this
Thank you for
comment
having
here.
me.
All right. Yes. So you heard a little bit of the beginning about teaching, and you are in the education field.
Mhm.
So you know a lot about that. What can you share in terms of tips for those who teach at every level? Why is it important?
You know, we think you mentioned when you said legacy, right? So we all have a legacy that we want to live. So what are those things that we love doing that it might be something that you make a living from? It might be something that you enjoy that you're not necessarily making money doing it, but you're good at it. It could be fishing, it could be basketball, whatever it is that you like. The best way to leave a legacy is to show somebody else how to do that. And then the other thing, as a trained teacher, the thing that we know is if you have a student and that student can teach it to someone else, that student has mastered it. So as a classroom teacher, that's something that we look for. If someone is struggling with something, a lot of times we talk about child speak. So as a teacher, you might be teaching it, and for some reason, it's just not clicking with your students. Have another student teach it because they speak each other's language. And a lot of times, the children are able to teach each other in ways that we're, as adults, we're not able to do
That is an excellent
it.
tip.
Mhm.
Now, what's interesting about that is when I teach at events, often
Mhm.
my instruction is if you have a question, don't ask your neighbor because they're trying to figure it out. Ask me. Because
Mhm.
as quilters, naturally, we want to help someone else.
Mhm.
And so sometimes I do have a student in a quilting class that wants to help another student. And
Mhm.
I like that idea,
Mhm.
especially if the way in which I'm sharing it, they're not understanding.
Absolutely, absolutely. So it's funny, sometimes we have to give up, and I don't want to say it's a control thing, but we have to give up some of that sometimes to help our students be better. We have to take a step back sometimes. And sometimes, just like with math, we like to say that there's one way to get the answer, but you know that that's not true. And the
Yes.
reason why we're able to find multiple solutions is because we allow the students to think and figure it out themselves. And that's how we're able to solve problems. If we had to rely on one brain for all of our answers, we'd be in trouble.
Oh, that's the truth. That is so true. So what else would you offer in terms of teaching
Mhm.
lessons that you've learned that change the course of how you share information?
There's a thing we call where you have to think about your thinking. And sometimes because we're not in a teacher mindset, there are things that we just do. So we have to think about how would I teach that to someone else.
That makes sense. So that goes in line with if you have a particular subject that you want to teach and an outcome, what are those steps? Because I just do it automatically, but I have to break it down. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely. So you talked about lesson planning is basically what you were talking about before. So you start with what is your objective? At the end of the time, whether it's 45 minutes, 20 minutes, an hour, at the end of this period, what is it that I want my students to be able to know and be able to do? So you start with the end in mind
Yes.
because you can get caught up with a very interesting activity. It's great, it's fun, but is that really what you wanted to teach? So we have to be very thoughtful about that. So as a teacher, you don't go into a classroom and just say, oh, what am I going to teach today? No, teachers and people talk about teachers and, teacher pay and having vacations and summers off, but when you're in the throes of it, they're working all the time. On the
Ah,
weekend, they're doing lesson plans. At night, when they go home, they're doing their lesson plans. I mean, really planning out step by step what it is that students need to do, what they need to teach to get their students to the end result that they want to have. So there's a
okay. So,
science to it.
yes, there
There is a
definitely
science to
is.
it.
And as an educator, you can go to school for that to learn this and become a student teacher. But as a quilter, as an artist, there isn't
Mhm,
always a school
mhm,
to learn
mhm.
how to teach quilting per se. If anyone in
Absolutely.
the chat knows of a school beside, I think there's like a couple of ladies who make different products and they teach how to use their product, but to become a quilting teacher, I don't know of a school. Does anyone know of a school? Do you?
So I don't, but what I do know, and it's in my own family history, that we've learned or they have learned from a grandmother, a mother, someone who came before them, and it's passed down, right? So what you need to think about, or what you should think about, if this is something that you want to do as a quilter, how did you learn? What was it about the person that taught you that made it click for you? Did you watch them for a couple hours and then you tried it? Did you watch them for 5 minutes and then you did what they did? Like whatever it was that helped you reach the level of expertise that you are at, that you want to share with someone else, you have to incorporate that. And what I really like that you said was that as a teacher, your students will tell you what they need. They will tell
Yes.
you what's next. So I always, and it's funny because I just had this conversation with my aunt, and I believe this to my core. No matter what it is, if you take one step or you take two steps, God will show you the next steps. But you gotta move. You
That's
gotta
true.
move. You can't stay there. You have to move. At least in my experience. I could be looking at something and can't figure out what is my next step. And then finally one day I'll get up and I'll move something. I'm like, oh, okay, now I see. It starts coming. So you gotta move, you gotta do something. Saying you want to learn this though is not going to help you make that quilt. Right? You got to start doing it.
I'm so glad you mentioned that because guilds, like I shared that example of the round robin,
Mhm,
quilters learn how to teach other quilters in community. So when you say it's your grandmother, your aunt, your cousin, if we are getting together as a quilting bee, that's a time of education, a time of learning. We don't call it that, but that's really
mhm,
what it is. That's how we learn.
mhm.
That's how we learn how to teach.
Teach. That's how you learn how to teach. You learn how to cook. You learn how to. That's how we learn everything. I mean, there were people who didn't have access to books, so they couldn't go and get a recipe and learn how to make something. And that's why when you think about it, I think about again my own experience, or in a lot of Black homes, they don't have the recipe. Is your mother would go in the kitchen and she just started putting stuff together? There wasn't a recipe written down, right?
Right.
So how would you learn to do that? You couldn't pick up a book and learn it. You had to get in the kitchen and see what Big Mama was doing.
This is such a good example of how what I was saying earlier about everyone is a teacher.
Mhm,
That in some way we teach others something, even if it's
mhm,
tying a shoe, learning how to tie a bow, to making a quilt. And then some take it to the next level and they want to go a little bit further. And you went further in your educational career. You
mhm,
were a principal, right?
mhm, mhm.
Share a little bit about your history and why you went that far in teaching.
So my background, I started off actually wanting to be a teacher, but back when I was in high school, they said, "Don't be a teacher; you'll never be able to take care of yourself.
Oh,
Don't do that." And they were pushing people to get into the business world. This was in I'm aging myself, but this was in the early '90s. And so, long story short, I ended up going to Bryant College, and I have a degree in business administration. When I got out of college, the business world was not doing what everyone said that it was going to do. And I was encouraged. I had um, parents who encouraged me to go back to school and get my certification in teaching. And so that's how I ended up teaching. And I married my teaching certification with my business background and became a building administrator. And so I worked at the school level. I worked at the central office. Um, Things happen in life. You know, my mom ended up getting sick. I took care of my mom for a while. We ended up losing her. But I learned from that experience that, you know, life is short. And so we need to do those things that make us feel like we're living, right? We need to do those things where we feel we're big. For me, that I was given the biggest contribution to my
Ah,
community, right? And
okay.
so I ended up going back to school for human resources. So I have a certificate from my local college in human resources. While I was doing that, I was in class and a woman said to me, "Have you ever thought about teaching at the college level?" And so I taught at the college level. And what I realized is that I absolutely love the teaching part. So even in human resources, it wasn't the contract negotiations, it was none of that. It was the professional development.
Ah, yes.
Again, the training piece, right? And so fast forward, what I'm doing full time now is that is what I'm doing. I'm training adults. But in the middle of all of that, um, again, thinking about my family and thinking about losing my mom and the things that she was closest to,
Hmm.
and talking to my aunt, I was inspired to write about our family legacy of quilting. And mainly because legacy, because the young people were not necessarily doing that as much as I felt that they should be doing. Like, I wanted my nieces, who are so far removed from going back to Alabama, sitting on the back porch and doing things with my grandfather and my grandmother, I didn't want them to lose that connection. And so for
Hmm.
me, I never, we talked about this before. I didn't learn to cook from my grandparents because at that time I didn't know that that was something that made us special. I thought that all families, all Black families cooked,
Mm-hmm.
right? I didn't
Mm-hmm.
think there was anything extraordinary about that. And it wasn't until I got older, and I'm just going to show this book because I know a lot of quilters know this book. It wasn't until I got older and started looking at some of the artifacts. My grandmother is in this book, Pearl, I'm going to say her name, Pearlie Kennedy Petway. My mother was quoted about her. My uncle was, it's all aunts, uncles, and cousins in this book. And I wanted to make sure that my nieces knew the story, but I also didn't want them to always get this story from someone else. I wanted them to get the story from someone who has had that lived experience. So I wanted to document things in a book for them. And so that was really where it came from. And talking to my aunt all the time, and she would say things. There would be things that confirmed what my mother was had told me, and then she would say things to me that I didn't know. And I'm like, you know, Auntie, someone needs to write this down. I kept saying, someone needs to write it down. Someone needs to write it down. And so then it came to, I'm going to write it down. So when we would talk, I had a little notebook, and I would write those little things down that she would say. And so then it finally became, you know what, Auntie, I'm going to put it in a book. And that was back in 2020 that I decided to write the book. And, you know, it's funny, you think about, you know, you have this desire to do something, right? And so then when it came down to it and I had this notebook, I'm like, am I the person who's supposed to write this story? Like, maybe I'm not the one. You know, because you think about when you do something like that, you're really putting yourself out there, right? You're putting yourself out there for scrutiny. You're
Yes.
putting yourself out there for, you know, there are other G's been descendants. Are you the one that's supposed to write this story? And so I sat on it for a little while. And then I said, well, who am I not to tell this story? You know, I had to think about, this is something I wanted to do for my nieces. So I decided that I was going to go ahead and, you know, during COVID, there was someone who could teach you anything, right? And I was at a point where I didn't realize that sometimes people would tell you that they were going to teach you something, and they really weren't going to teach you unless you paid them thousands and thousands of dollars, right? I wasn't that smart to how funnel all this marketing and I just didn't know. And so I trusted that this woman, Crystal Swain Bates, was actually going to teach me what she said she was going to teach me. And she did. So I learned, I published, it was like a notebook, right? It was a to-do journal for educators. And I did the whole thing from the cover, back cover, front cover. I did it all myself based upon what I had learned from her. So that was my foot in the door.
Okay. So you started off by having this inspiration to accurately put down the history of your family,
Mhm. Mhm.
something that you didn't realize until you saw that book. Wow, you know what? I need to
Mhm.
document this. You spoke to family
Mhm.
members, you recorded it, then you
Mhm.
second guessed yourself. People, we do that. We say, am I the one? So
Am I
anyone
the
who is
one?
doubting, right? If you're in
Am
a
I the
place
one?
where you don't think you're supposed to do something or you're doubting, listen to Tangela's story and how she progressed to saying, well, why can't I do it?
That's right.
Why can't I be the one? And I love this because, like you said earlier, there are a lot of ways in which to learn or to teach because
Mhm.
we're all different. So the way you tell the story will be different than where your cousin tells the story, but they're both valid stories to share,
Absolutely.
right? And then I
Absolutely.
love it that you decided to get some help with first creating this book about for educators.
Mhm.
There's a process.
Exactly. And who knew? When you're used to one industry and you kind of understand the rhythm and flow, ebbs and flows, and how it works. But then when I started, I'm like, wow, there's a process to get an illustrator. There's a process to get an editor. Like, I mean, all this stuff exists. There's a huge world out there that if you're in one area, you don't necessarily know all of this. Right. And so I
Right.
was able to learn that through my work with Crystal Swain Bates.
That's fantastic. I think that is an important thing to note is that when we set out to accomplish a big goal, that it's okay to get help. It's necessary because there's this new set of skills that we may learn, or maybe we don't know how to do it, and we need someone to help direct us.
Absolutely. And you can waste a lot of time trying to figure it out when there's someone who's already traveled down that road.
Exactly. Exactly. And I think that's one reason why I wanted to share this tonight about teaching and publishing so that those in the Quilt Conversations live community who want to teach at different levels, no matter what level it is, or to publish, that there's different ways to do it and that they can do it.
Mhm.
So I want to ask you about your first book is Pearl. We talked about that the
Mhm.
last time you were here, but the second book, we didn't have a chance to talk about Charles. Can you share a little
Mhm.
bit about Charles?
Yes. So one of the things that Crystal Swain Bates taught was that if you have one book with one character, you can take that same story and publish another book with a different character. So publishing is a numbers game, right? So you can have one book out there, but how many people are going to buy that one book again? And you may have a customer who's willing to buy a second book, but if you don't have one, they can't purchase it, right? And so that's where Charles came from. And so Charles also has a quilt on the cover that our family owns. This was actually a piece of my brother's baby quilt that's on the cover.
Oh, wow.
Yes. And so
Neat.
again, it's go
Can you
ahead, I'm
still
sorry.
hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
So it's about a little boy who's decided that he wants to make a G's Ben quilt just like his grandmother. And
Oh,
so you know how little kids are, they start to embody the adults. And so he goes about talking about the history of the quilts.
is there a favorite section of the book that you'd like to share with us?
The one I have a couple, but one page that I particularly like is after Charles finishes telling his friends about the quilt. He says, "Do you have any questions?"
Hold on, let me get to the page. Whoops, let me go back. Whoops, sorry. Go back here. Okay, there we go. All right.
Okay.
Go ahead. What page is it?
So there isn't a page number, but it's the beach quilt.
Oh, the beach quilt. Okay.
Yeah, my aunt actually made this for my brother. He wanted a beach themed quilt. So this
Okay,
is
go
his
ahead.
quilt that he owns. So Charles says, "Do you have any questions?" Charles asked his friends. "No," they answered in unison. "Good," Charles said. "Now, when all the pieces are together, the backing is folded to the front and the quilt is binded together. Some people quilt straight lines, crooked lines. Patterns or designs. Sometimes grandma follows the designs on the quilt top. Then there are times when she sews puzzle patterns. She says that it depends on what God says when they talk. I like looking on the back of the quilt to see her designs. So, embedded in the book are different life lessons, right? So, no
Oh,
matter what it is that you're doing, you should think about what God says, right? Incorporate what God says and what it is that you're doing. And He gives her an idea every time. That's in the book as well.
okay. Now, there are companions to each book.
hmm
Is this
And you can,
also
yes. So,
from
right here,
Crystal? Yes.
there's Charles and his G's been closer. There's a coloring and activity book. Because again, as an educator, right, you want to give children the opportunity to write about what they've just read. I also wanted to give them the opportunity to write their own stories. So even though my book is about quilting, that's our part of our family story because that's not the whole story, right? Every family has a story. So when I talk to kids and I talk to adults, I talk to them about what are your family stories? What makes your family special? Because every family is special. And I encourage them to talk to their kids about it. I encourage them to show their kids how if it's something to make, that they can make, if it's something to cook, whatever it is, teach their children how to do that. And, as parents, and I don't have children, but I have nieces and I know how busy their family is, right? People are really busy. And so a child may say, can you show me? Or I want to get in the kitchen and help you tonight. And there's a tendency to say, what, I have 10 minutes to get dinner on the table. Not tonight, right? But
Yes.
that next night might not come and opportunity may not be there. So I just
Right.
encourage people to slow down and to share what's important with their kids. It's not about being materialistic, it's about having that legacy to pass on to the next generation. And what I say to kids who they may be in situations where they don't know, they don't have elders in their family to share, then I say your legacy starts with you. What's important to you right now? Because those are the things that you're going to want to carry down to the next generation.
I love how you have both together, teaching the legacy through the book,
hmm
but then also continuing that legacy, but also education through the companion coloring book, how they work
hmm
together.
hmm
That it's just wonderful because some might think, well, why should I publish a book? And it's
hmm
one of those modes of education that crosses um age generations, right?
hmm
It's something that everyone can relate to. I mean, even quilters, we have quilting coloring books. Adults
hmm
like to color,
Yes,
right?
absolutely. hmm
Yeah. So
Absolutely.
the other thing that I wanted to talk a little bit about is once you have a class that you teach, you have a book and a companion coloring book, how do you promote? How do you get it out there that you have this resource?
So, what I just want to add in very quickly is
Yes.
that you have to make sure that the book that you're creating is not just the book that you want. You have to make sure that
Ah,
the book that you're creating is a book that someone else wants. And that's a trap that many of us get into. We're so wedded to the idea that the book should be this. And so I just have to call another agency that I worked with. I worked with Pen Legacy, which is another publishing company. They work with self publishers, people who want to self publish their books. And so they were very instrumental in making sure that the book that I wanted to put out would be a book that I would have an audience for. And so I worked with them for that as well. So it can't be about what you want to do because you're going to have a lot of copies of a book sitting on a shelf.
okay.
You probably will only buy one.
So how did you know to even take that step to find out if your idea of sharing your family's legacy in book form
hmm
was something that, how did you even know to do that?
Well, part of it was, and I talk about God a lot because I know it was Him. So all of these people that I mentioned, were in my path because I didn't even know to look for them.
Ah.
I didn't even know, I didn't know to look for them. They were in my path. So whether it was the Facebook algorithm, I don't know what it was, but they were in my path. And so that was how. And a lot of times it's not necessarily even a message that was given to me directly about my book, but when you're in community with other people and we're all talking about our struggles, we're all at the same point trying to create this thing that we want to be our book baby, right? So you listen and you learn from other people's story. And that's how I came to that. So I knew that there was an audience for G's Ben stuff just because of the reaction that I would get when I would say that I was from G's Ben. When I was talking to other quilters, the woman who even taught me how to quilt, who wasn't a G's Ben quilter, but she knew that I had the desire and she felt I needed to know how. And so that was how I learned. So that was a big piece. And then the other thing I just want to say too is that when you I'm always promoting my book, right? You want to talk about, I'm always doing that. And so I get the question often, did you do another book? I saw you talking about your book the other day. Did you do another book? There are so many people on this planet who do not know about my book. I had to come to the reality that even though I talk about it all the time, there are so many more people that don't know about what I do. So I have to keep saying it. I have to keep talking about it. So people who always know, my apologies. But I need to keep talking about it because there's so many people who are just, I had family members who knew about Pearl, and I did a post about Charles. This was a year later. You have a book, you have Charles, you have a male version of the book? They didn't know.
They didn't know.
So you have to, if you get tired of talking about your book, the book stops there. I sell my book when I do something. I'm either on a
Mm.
podcast, I'm either doing a post, I am in somebody else's group talking about it. But if I don't do something, the world doesn't know about my book. So, as an author, if you think that you're going to create this book and you're going to sit back and make $1 million, you're going to post one time on Facebook and 1 million people are going to go to Amazon or whatever independent
Yes.
bookstore, wherever your books are. It doesn't work like that. This
Okay.
is when the work starts. The work starts after you finish the book, after the book is printed, and you're sitting here like, this is the work. Right now, this is the work.
That is true. I've heard also that whether we self-publish or publish with a publishing company, you still have to talk about your book and promote it. They're not
Yeah.
necessarily going to do all that. They may do a little, but it's really up to the author. Is that true?
That is true, and it doesn't change. Like you said, regardless of how your book is in the world, you still have to because you're part of the product. So I can send someone to a vending event to stand behind the table with my books, but they can't tell my story the way I would tell my story. People are not going to connect to them about somebody else's book the way they will connect to me.
Okay.
They're
Okay.
not.
So
And I
tell
see.
us about this children's book museum.
So every year for Black Children's Book Week, there is, as part of that, so let me take a step back. So there are going to be activities all over the country during Black Children's Book Week. And so this was I think this was a flyer from last year that I shared with you, but I've been doing it every year for 3 years. So
Okay.
it's a virtual book museum. So you go into that website and you get to see all of the books. There's a link to everyone's book if you want to purchase it. But it's the way, people often say, well, I can't find diverse books. I can't find diverse books, especially in the world that we're living in right now, where there's this push to maybe not make them as visible as we would like them to be. So this is an
Mm-hmm.
opportunity for people who are looking for diverse books to go in and just walk around that virtual museum. I absolutely love it.
Okay. Now, some of this might be too much for some people. I know there are a lot of ways in which we can
Hmm.
promote. And do you just find out what other authors are doing in the children's book area, or do you find out different things that focus on children's books? How do you even go about finding something like this out? Are you in a publisher's group? How does this work?
So I am in Crystal Swain Bates has a group. So I am in her group. There is one is six figure. Oh, I'm not going to remember the name of it. There's one that's on, and I'll go back into the and add it into the chat later. But there's one that's free and open to everyone that's on Facebook. We get a lot of ideas there. And then she has another group that's a paid group that we're in. It's a monthly or a yearly fee to be in that group. And when I tell you from talking to each other, from the resources that she gives us, there are more ideas than I could actually do, right? So you
Mm,
need to, it goes back to if you knew what to do, you would do it,
right.
right? If I know what
Right.
to do, I do it. So you need someone who's been there and done that, who can show you what to do. The picture that you're looking at right now is back in October. They had airing of the quilts in Gee's Bend, Alabama, which is Boykin, Alabama. It was the second year. I wasn't able to go the previous year, but I was able to go this year. So you see me there, and I have some products. That's something we talked about in the group as well. Trying out different products to see what your audience, what they're interested in. I actually had something printed in the book special for airing of the quilts. So it was airing of the quilts and the date. So those books were different than books that people would get anywhere else. Yes, I
Ah,
had a ball. It was a lot of work,
yes.
but going back to marketing and promoting. So one of the things I did even before that event started was I contacted schools in the area. And so while I was
Ah,
there the week leading up to the event, I was able to do author visits at four local schools. So I was in
okay.
Selma, Alabama. I was in Utah, Alabama. I was in Cuba, places in Alabama I had never heard of before.
Wow. Wow. You
Yeah.
are an inspiration, boy.
Oh, well, thank you.
Um, because there's schools, there's indoor, outdoor events, and I'm sure there's some events that you've tried that just were not a fit. And but you learn from them. What are
Hmm.
some of the
Hmm.
lessons that you've learned when it comes to promoting?
I would say, one, be careful when you do, because there's lots of groups where you can find out about all these different events where they're looking for vendors. Don't automatically assume that those promoters of the event are going to promote their own events.
Oh.
Yes. So this is I feel I'm among friends. I can just say it, right? I'm among friends. Um, all events are not created equal. And so I tend to ask questions. So how many people are you expecting? Was this your first year? So all of those different kinds of questions. And then the other thing is you need to know your target audience. So
Mm.
if my audience is going to be quilters, for example, the perfect event for me is to go to a quilt show, right? Some other events, maybe not so much. So
Yes.
you have to know. But the one thing that I will say though, in all of the events that I've gone to, even if I haven't sold a lot of books, I
Mhm.
tend to make connections because everyone has a child who goes to school, right? Most people have a child who goes to school, they work in the school, they live in a town with a library. So I try to I'm good at finding ways to get someone to come to the table. Oh, I would buy your book, but I don't have any kids. Oh, well, consider donating to your library. And so I don't put them on the spot. What I will do is I'll have my business card. Like, you're not interested. My books are available. I tell them where they're available. Consider donating to your library. But
That's a
sometimes
neat.
people, they want to support you, but they don't know how. So
How?
it's my job to help them. Mhm.
Wow, that is fantastic. We probably want to have some time for Q&A. Some people want to probably ask some questions. So ladies, stop dropping your questions in the chat as we move to the next area. Before we leave this scene, I have one more thing that I wanted to share. But ladies, start
Mhm.
dropping your questions for Tangela in the chat and we will start to ask answer some of those questions. I wanted you to talk
Absolutely.
about the National Authors Day.
Yes, yes.
What is that?
So, and it's funny, I go back to you don't have to know everything, right? So I didn't even know there was a day in the year that was National Authors Day at this point. But this is the second time that this organization has invited me to come and talk to their kids. And so what I love, yes. what I love about it is that it's local authors, and we all have the opportunity to share about our books. And the reception for the kids from kids is always, I mean, it's heartwarming when you do things like this. The first time I did it, I was leaving. I'm going to my car. I'm putting my things in the car, and a little girl walks by the car, and she said, "I love your book." Right? And so that's when you know, okay, what I did meant something. It mattered. But it's opportunities for, especially organizations that work with kids, for them to invite local authors to come into their buildings and to share their books.
Wow, that is fantastic. I am really excited about that. Um, Let me go back here. Now, let's see. I don't see any questions just yet.
Mm.
Um, Hopefully, ladies, you can stay a little bit longer because this is such a good session. And Tangela, thank you for being here. This was a last minute ask, and you have a very busy schedule. So I want to acknowledge publicly that I
Thank
appreciate you coming on this evening at the very last minute. Thank
you.
you,
You're
thank you,
welcome.
thank you. I wanted to share some exciting news. I think it's exciting about Gee's Ben being in Target.
Yes, yes,
And
yes.
I think you're wearing something from Target. Are you?
Yes, I am. Yes, I am. So, for those who don't know, Target supports Black vendors during Black History Month. So they pick different vendors every year to highlight. And I didn't even know this. I found out when the rest of the world found out that G's Ben, their designs were going to be featured. And so I'm actually wearing, and I didn't want to take the tag off. I had to take the tag off because I didn't want to start raising my arm and you see the tags hanging. But um, here, this is a tag from the piece that I'm wearing right now. And that is my cousin, her daughter, and her granddaughter. So that's three generations of G's Ben quilters. And this is their contribution to the collection. And
Wow.
so there's a tumbler you can see there. There's a little bag. There's a quilted jacket. There are a couple other pieces, a t-shirt, and the pieces are flying off the shelf.
Woohoo.
The pieces are
Awesome.
flying off the shelf. And, I have to give my thanks to them all as well because my books have always been available at Target Online from the time that I published. And now when people go online, they ask, please check Target out. When people go online, look, because they have to go online because a lot of times the thing that they want is sold out in the stores. So they're going online and they put in G's Ben, and guess what pops up? My
Pearl?
book. Yes, Pearl and Charles are popping up. So it has been a whirlwind for me in terms of, I kind of feel like the character, it was the character Will Smith played, where he had that contraption that he had made, and he was Pursuit of Happiness.
Oh,
When he
okay,
was
yes.
walking around trying to get people to buy, he's talking about his thing, he's talking about it, and no one's interested. And so I kind of feel like that. I feel like I've been talking about G's Ben for how many years, right? And now people are saying, "Oh, wait a minute, I've heard about that before." Right? So it's a good feeling. It's a
It
very good
must be
feeling.
very
Yes,
exciting. We do
it
have a
really is.
question from Lori.
So you know about merchandising. So that is a thought. That would be the next thing. But I have not looked into it. One of the things that we learned in the group that I'm in is where to source those types of things. So I have some options, but I have not gone there yet. So,
That
and
is a
because you
very
mentioned it,
good question. A
yes,
doll of Pearl
yes,
and Charles. Wow.
that would be awesome.
Now, I don't want anyone to miss out on, and so I did go ahead and find um, a way to share some photos that you had sent me of the
Hmm.
display in Target for Black
Yes,
History Month. Thank you for sharing that. Tell
you're
us a little bit
welcome.
about what we're seeing.
So there you have, and I have one up here, down here, but there's a journal. I can grab it. Try not to let anything fall. So here's the journal with lines that you can a notebook and there's a pattern. And what I like is every item, they tell you, this is another one of my cousins, Caster. It tells you whose design it is. So you see the mug, you see the small bag, and there's a cover journal as well. And I have not seen the coasters anywhere. I haven't even
Oh,
seen them online, but those are the coasters.
okay. And then we
And
have this one.
yes, I believe it or not, I was in a group and they want to know who that gentleman is. And so I did confirm he's a Target model. So he's not a cousin.
Okay. Now,
But
you
yeah,
did get a jacket, right? You have one
yes,
of the
I
quilted
have
jackets.
that jacket. Yes, I have the jacket. I thought I'd change it up today and wear my cousin's piece.
Okay. And then you sent this to me as well.
I
Pearl.
did. You're probably going to get me in trouble.
Uh-oh.
So, no, I'm just teasing. You know
Okay.
what I did? So of course, well, and they sell it online. They just don't have it in store. So my joke on social media was that Pearl and Charles wanted to go to Target to see their cousins. And so I
Ah.
took copies out of my car and I brought them into Target and I took pictures.
Fantastic. What a neat idea. Neat idea. Let's see. Let's go to the actual Target website. There she is. Pearl.
Yes.
Oops, let me fix that. There we go.
And
Change
while
that.
you're there, can you go to the item, the sweatshirt that I'm wearing? Is it there?
Let's
Because I want
see.
to show you what I saw and I screamed. Is
Uh-oh.
they gonna, they may not have it.
I would have to, let's see, search it. Let's
Wow.
see.
It popped. Oh, take Pearl out. Yeah, just do the G's then. Maybe
Okay.
it'll pop up. Because I went online because I wanted to see, they're saying that the clothing items are running a little bit big. Can you click into
This one here?
the hoodie? Yes. All right, so go down and I'm looking for the reviews because I went in to take a peek at the reviews. You may have to go back up and click it from the top where the
Okay.
stars are.
Oh,
See the
all
stars
right.
where it says 22?
Yes.
Show
Show.
reviews.
Okay, there we
Yes.
go.
Click that middle picture right there.
All
Do
right.
you see it?
Oh,
Do you see
wow.
what he's
Look at
holding?
that.
I wasn't expecting that. I just really wanted to see how the sweatshirt was fitting. If it was,
Oh,
the other pieces are running a little big, and so I
yes.
wanted to know what size to get in case I had to get it online. And I looked, I said, "Oh, he is holding Charles."
Yes. That's fantastic. The
Yes,
sweatshirt and Charles and a young fellow who wants to make a quilt.
isn't that beautiful?
That is fantastic. Kimberly says, "Wow."
It really was. I wasn't
Yeah.
expecting that at all.
Wow. Well, where
Yeah.
else can ladies find your books and your coloring books? We have your website here.
hmm You can go to my website, but what I'm asking people right now, because I really want to encourage Target to put the book on the shelves. And so I've been
Ah,
directing people to Target to see if that will be helpful. So you talk
okay.
about your big goals, right? You've been talking about big goals. So I'm saying my big goal out loud. I would love to have it in retail stores.
Rather than have it just be during February, but for it to physically be
Absolutely.
in their book section.
Yes, I would love that. And hopefully maybe they'll carry a few G's Ben pieces beyond Black History Month. We'll see. I don't know.
Especially now that they have sold out. It says that there's a demand for it, and
hmm
they should make it available beyond February because there is a demand. And
And
I
more
tried to get
products.
something at my local shop. I checked online and they said, nope, not going to happen. It's like, because it,
Wow.
it was out of stock, out of stock, out of stock, out of stock. Right.
hmm
So
hmm
those who went in early, they were the ones that were able to get something. Hopefully, they will restock before the end of the month. I hope so. So, and let's see if there are any additional questions. I know that Terry said that she purchased one for herself and one for her mom, and they are both
Oh,
fans. Yeah,
no,
yeah. So that's pretty
awesome.
neat. Yeah, and then Kimberly said they sold out in Maryland.
Wow.
The Target sold out in Maryland. Yeah.
So ask for, help us out, ask for the products. The other interesting piece is that because people know the history that the G's Ben quilters were not always compensated for their gifts. There were actually people that reached out to me and said, I want to buy it, but is this money going back to the community? And so I was able to talk to some of obviously my cousins and some of the G's Ben quilters, and they confirmed, I don't know the details, right? So I don't know, the terms, but they are saying that they are being compensated. They were at the table this time.
Okay. That is good to
Mhm.
know. That's good to
Mhm.
know. Thank you for sharing
Yeah.
that because I think that
Mhm.
is important um, to know that we are contributing to the Geese Ben Quilters,
Yes.
right? To our
Yes.
community. And it just goes full circle. I just love that, right?
Yeah, it does.
It
It
is.
does.
Thank you for spending so much time with us. Let me check the chat one more time to see if there are any additional questions. I don't see any. Lori, hopefully I didn't miss any. If I did, let me know. Lori's our chat moderator on YouTube.
Oh.
Do you have any last words of wisdom and or encouragement for those who
Mhm.
are teaching or are thinking about publishing or writing a book?
I just want to say that no one has your voice but you. You were put here on this earth, you've had unique experiences. Someone needs to hear your story. And so the only way to make sure that that story gets translated the way you want it translated is for you to tell your story. So I encourage you to do it. There's nothing special about me in terms of, I had a special training and I knew all my life that this was what I want. None of that. None of that. If you have a desire, I encourage you to do something with it.
That's a good encouragement. Thank you for that. I want to
Mhm.
ask one more question because someone can hear that and they can say, but I'm afraid.
Mhm.
Often you said in order to get something going we have to start. You said that earlier. Your mom said that. What if you look back
Mhm.
when you stopped or hesitated, what was it that helped you to take the first step that you can tell someone to not be afraid, that it's not as bad as you think?
Two things. One, no one else had done what I did. I'm the only descendant that I am aware of who has written a children's book. So that was one. And two, I wanted it for my nieces. I
That-
wanted it for my nieces. And actually, I have to say three because there's so many of us who have had that experience. When I think about all of us, so I think about my cousins, I think about other people that grew up in that area, I think about my aunts and uncles. Think about how many stories there are. You talk about some storytellers, you can sit and talk to my uncle for hours just to hear his voice, that deep southern voice and the way he tells a story, and he leaves you wanting to say, is that the truth? But you shouldn't ask him that. But just so many stories. There's so many things, and we can look back and we can sit back and say, "Oh, well, this person is doing this. That person is doing," and we can say, "Oh, well, why do they get?" You can do that, or you can say, "Okay, this is part of my history. What am I going to do to honor my ancestors?" And all of those things were playing through my mind. This was a gift my grandmothers left me. They didn't have money, they didn't have inheritances that they left us. All those things you hear about other families, the rock of, those rich families have. We didn't have any of this. But look what they did leave us.
right.
And so who am I not to do something with that?
Yeah. Your family was rich in a different way, right?
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
that was your, for someone who is afraid, I get from you that what is your true motivation? That is what's going to help you get through those difficult parts, that why you were
Absolutely.
doing it.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. It's going to be lost if I don't use my voice. I am the bridge between my ancestors and the next generation. So, what am I going to do with that information?
Right. Right.
Hmm.
Well, thanks again for being here. What a joy, what a pleasure, what a privilege.
Thank
Thank you, Tangela. I don't see any additional questions. We might be back here again. Who knows, right?
I'm here. If anyone who supported me from the beginning, you can't get rid of me. So just
All
ask.
right.
Okay, just let me know.
Okay. Well, take care. We'll see you next time. Thank you for having this time with us. We really appreciate all that you're doing for teaching and encouraging others to teach and publish. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Ladies, was that fantastic? Were you taking notes? Thank you for staying a little bit extra to hear Tangela's story. I am encouraged. I hope you are, and that you are thinking about what the next step is for you in your journey. There was one additional question that I wanted to ask Tangela, but maybe I'll save it for the next time. And that had to do with what we have been talking about from the beginning of this year. And that is thinking bigger. What was the next step for her? Maybe the next step is the question that Lori asked about creating a Pearl and Charles doll. Wouldn't you love to see that? That would be wonderful. We know that she is looking forward to the books and the coloring book to be on the shelf in Target, any retail store on the shelf. So that is thinking big, right? She's well on her way. And I am so appreciative of her taking her time to share her expertise, her wisdom, and her knowledge and tips with us. What about you? Do you feel the same way I do? Let's see. We have a lot of thank yous happening. Thank you, Tangela. Yes. Pearl and Charles are super cute books. Rochelle says thank you. Another great date night. Yes, it has been fantastic. Speaking of date night, did you notice this in the background? See that tote? It says date night. Then there's a little zippered pouch right here, date night. Did you know right here on the bottom on YouTube, there's a little shelf where you can get a date night tote, a date night zippered pouch. Let me share that with you. Let's see if I can get that up. Here we go. And there are sweatshirts. This is something brand new. If you want to get a date night tote, zipper pouch, mug, sweatshirt, t shirt, check that out right here on YouTube. And if you are just joining us for the first time, thank you. Thank you for being here at Quilt Conversations Live. Look at the replays for other conversations about quilting and quilting things. Hit the notification bell if you're a subscriber, if you haven't already. If you're not a subscriber, why not subscribe? And don't keep it a secret. Tell your friends. We have a wonderful time here talking about things related to quilting and about life, right? Ladies, I all right. Kimberly says she ordered one already on her phone. She noticed. Jacqueline says, absolutely, just fabulous. Thank you for another inspiring session. You're welcome, Lori. Ladies, I have one more thing. I know we're a little bit over, but since I put it together, I wanted to let you know that anytime you make something, there's someone in the world who really wants to see it. I know you might doubt that. There's so many opportunities to share what you do, what you make in the quilting world. So if you want to start to dip your toe into that, you can submit to publications, to magazines. They always have listed inside a request for quilts, for ideas about quilts, and you can get started. That's how I started. This is one of my quilts that was in a magazine. They have a rolling set of deadlines for every issue. It does take about 2 years between inspiration, collaboration, making the quilt, submitting it, and then it being printed in the magazine. So it's never a rush. You have time. So this is an example. Another example is Quick and Easy. I have published quilts in there that are quick and easy for beginners. And I didn't start here. Remember, in the beginning, I started by submitting to calls for quilts with different publications, meaning small books. Um, that one that was the 1000 quilt inspirations I talked about earlier. These were quilts I already had made, and I just submitted a photo and said, let's see what happens. But you can also plan and design something for a specific topic as well, and you can do that with magazines. So I just want to encourage those who are thinking about it that these opportunities, like Tangela shared, she actively pursues opportunities. So if you want to go in that direction, actively pursue it. And you can do it in multiple ways. Go to different publications, see if they have a call for quilts, and they have it for various levels. See if there's a quilt show. Submit your quilt to a show. I know that Terry did that, and her quilt went into multiple shows one year. Ladies, I want to encourage you to think big, to go to the next step. This particular quilt, they started this new magazine. I was already working with this particular publisher, and they invited me to participate in this brand new magazine and not only design a quilt, but write a story about my design. And this one is called Sweet Candy. It's about my grandmother. Every time I would visit her, she'd have hard candy sitting on the living room table where we could eat. And my favorite was butterscotch. So I named this after that experience with my grandmother, Sweet Candy. I'm telling my story, my voice in a publication. You can do the same thing, right? And then this was one that I showed earlier, 3x3. This was a call, a submission. They had a black and white issue. Anyone could submit. Anyone, you, me, anyone. You take a chance. All these are quilters who took a chance and submitted their idea, their quilt, their story, their vision. You can do the same. All right, let's see. Let's see. Any other things before I end? I know we've went over. Can we still get the pattern? So I'm not sure which quilt that was. If you're thinking about the different magazines I shared, most of them are still available in the magazine in a PDF. You may not be able to get the physical magazine, but you can go to quiltingdaily.com. Quiltingdaily.com and look up my name. Just put Geraldine Wilkins, and then my patterns will come up. All right. Ladies, thank you. I'll see you next time for another Quilt Conversations Live.